Let me tell you about a student that I worked with. We'll call him Jay to protect his privacy. He failed step 1. He was so depressed that he couldn't get out of bed. I still remember, his mother literally had to stage an intervention for him. She literally dragged him from his bed to his meeting with us. Now, before you think, oh God, he should have just done 100 UWorld questions a day, let me tell you what he actually did. First of all, he did the whole, let's just do 100 UWorld questions a day thing. Second, he did NBMEs, like all of them. And he had done a ton of Anki, like all the pre-made cards, and his scores on his NBMEs were actually quite good. He was scoring like, 60s, and he still failed his exam. Now, for someone who had done everything that you're supposed to do, how is it that he failed? This is what we discovered. He was using the right materials in the wrong way. He was cramming, not really learning. He was memorizing all the pre-made Anki decks without really understanding. His NBME scores looked okay on the surface, but it was really fragile because any time that they changed what it is that they were asking or the way that they were asking it, he would struggle because he could memorize the answers to questions, but would struggle in novel situations. It was as if he'd memorized the answer key rather than understanding the process. When he got to test day, the questions were slightly different and everything fell apart. So what we did is that we changed his approach, not his resources. It was the same UWorld, the same first aid, the same Anki, but a completely different method. Within 2 months, he scored a 92% on his practice NBME. Now for context, that would be like the top 3% when step 1 was actually scored. Nowadays, you never see people score a 92% on their NBMEs. And this was an unused NBME that had come out in the meantime. He passed step 1, he crushed his shelf exams, and he did substantially better on step 2. Ultimately, he matched into urology, one of the most competitive specialties out there, despite the fact that he'd failed step 1. So what did he actually change so that he could transform his approach and score substantially better on his retake and completely change the trajectory of his medical career? It comes down to these 10 steps. Step number 1 is to know in 24 hours if your approach is gonna work or not. Most students wait until an NBME to find out if their studying is working. Now, conservatively, that might be a week or probably longer, and sometimes months of potentially wasted effort because you're waiting all of that time when you change something. The issue is that if you're waiting for your next NBME, which might be weeks or months after, you aren't gonna know for weeks or months whether your studying is actually working. In addition to that, if your NBME doesn't go up, you have no idea what really went wrong. Right? Maybe it was the number of questions that you were doing. Maybe it was the fact that you were doing this set of resources. Maybe it was that you were doing this set of lectures over this set of lectures. Maybe it was the fact that you were taking notes. Maybe it was these pre-made Anki cards that you found. You're changing so many things at one time, and the time it takes for you to know whether it's working or not is so long that it just becomes this really confused mess of like, I have no idea what's going on and I don't know how it is that I need to fix my efforts so that I can get a higher score. It's like hitting a tennis ball and not knowing where it went for 2 weeks. You're never going to improve that way. The solution is what we call the 80% mastery method. What you want to do is you want to pick a single subtopic. I recommend coronary artery disease because it's relatively clean and self-contained, meaning I don't have to understand other things in order to understand that if you block a coronary artery, then it's going to cause ischemia and eventually necrosis of the muscle that is being fed by that coronary artery, right? It's very simple and self-contained. Then you want to study the entire first aid section on that topic. I highly recommend that you make flashcards so that you don't forget it. Then you want to test yourself using 10 consecutive unused QBank questions on that particular subtopic. I like UWorld, but there's a lot of other QBanks out there that I think can do the same thing. Your goal is that within 24 hours, you want to get 80% or more correct on those questions. If you can get 80% in less than 24 hours, you know that your approach is working at least reasonably well. Then you can just scale it. Then you can increase the number of questions. Then you can go and do those 100 UWorld questions a day. If not, you know that there's something broken. You have to fix that now, because if you just do a bunch of questions, you're only going to be reinforcing the bad habits that are preventing you from getting higher scores in the first place. Why do we recommend 80% and not 70 or 90 or, Because 60% is fragile. It's simple math. If you're at 50% right now overall, and you get half of the content to 80%, now your average becomes at least 65%. 65% overall gives you approximately a 95% chance of passing step 1. If I want to increase that further, then I just have to add more subjects that I would be getting at 80%, and I can just continuously increase my score. Plus, 80% gives you a buffer so that if you forget stuff, if you have a bad day, if you've got test day nerves, it still gives you that margin for error in case that something happens. Now, instead, if you only get 60% on something that you just studied, what happens when you forget some of it? The other issue is that if life happens, right? Like let's say that your dog dies, or your grandmother passes away, or you get really, really stressed the night before and you can't sleep, then those things can cause your score to go down temporarily. The issue is that if you're just skating by, if you're just barely at the passing line, then when those things happen, then your score can drop and you can actually fail your exam, right? We get a lot of consultations from people who just were barely passing, and then something happened on the day of their exam, and then they didn't have enough of a buffer, and then they ended up failing. The more subjects that you can add that are at 80%, and the greater the overall score that you have going into your test, the greater the likelihood that you're going to be resilient against all sorts of difficulties. You might be asking, what if I don't hit 80% on that first subject? The answer is don't move on. You know that there's something wrong. If you can't study something and get at least 80% on it in a day or two, there's probably something wrong, and it means that you need to fix it now rather than wasting weeks of time studying for things and not doing it in the right way. If you only take one thing away from this video, remember that you should know if your studying is working in a day, not a month. If you're a medical student or a doctor preparing for either the USMLEs or COMLEX or one of your medical board exams, then be sure to sign up for our free 14-step program where we'll walk you through the most efficient ways for you to improve your score in a short period of time. And if you're interested in getting there faster, be sure to book a free call with our team where we'll break down what it is that's holding you back, and if it makes sense, explain how it is that we can help you to get there more efficiently.